All right, without further ado, our next speaker is going to speak on the experiences of Uganda. As we all know, in UK, they keep the picture of Idi Amin and they worship him because, thank God for him, everybody else became successful in UK. But Dr. Bhalwany will enlighten us on this aspect. Nara Salawat.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Uganda, also known as the Pearl of Africa, was a beautiful country. Just to give you a little background, it became a British colony from 1896 till 1962. Good years, you know, the British were doing everything, built the railways. During that time, a lot of people, especially from India, Pakistan, who were traveling to Dar es Salaam, Mombasa, looking for opportunities, business. So it was quite an influx of people immigrating from the east into Africa. And Uganda was quite beautiful. A lot of people came, started businesses, started farms, whether it was sugar farm, coffee farms, mining, everything. And it was flourishing, everything was going smooth. In 1962, they got independence. And the first elected government, again, things were going pretty good. They were not perfect, but there was no problems until 9 years after independence in 1971, when the Prime Minister Obote was overseas, the commander-in-chief took over. He just, and his name was Idi Amin. He was a Muslim, so we had the first Muslim leader in Uganda, and everything seemed like maybe things will be okay. First couple of months, and then gradually things started changing. Now it's not quite clear exactly. It wasn't just one thing, there were several things. You know, he wanted to, first of all, nationalize everything, because our Asians who came to Uganda, they were all business people, they were well off, they lived in good houses, cars, so it was kind of, they were jealous, I suppose. And he wanted to reverse that so that all the Africans would get control of everything. That was one of his plans. The other plan, which he wanted to force intermarriages, and that was a big concern for our community, you know. And so when those things were slowly coming to a head, some people started preparing. For example, my father decided, let's move part of the family to Pakistan. So we opened a small business there. My brother and my parents went there, and my daughter and my sister. So some people did that. Or those who had young girls, they tried to send them out to England or Kenya or Tanzania. Now, after about a year, and this was in 1972, and it's not completely clear. Some people say he just had a dream that Asians are a threat to his life. Some say he proposed to somebody's wife, Bhalwany's wife, who, you know, Bhalwany was a big business person. And something triggered, but he came up one morning and he said, I had a dream. You are a threat to me, so I'm giving you 90 days for all the Asians to leave. 90 days. And that was, so you can imagine all these families who are well settled. For previous 100 years, they've been moving, at least 3 or 4 generations. They were all settled. Like my family, my uncles, and all the relatives were in one town, really well settled, and now suddenly you get this 90 days and you have to all leave. So it was quite a chaos. Now, 90 days, fine, it's easy to leave, but again, the question was, where do we go? That was a big question. A lot of people had British passports, so there was a big lineup at the British embassy trying to get visas to go to Britain. Now, I was a Ugandan citizen. My father was a citizen. My mother was a British. But eventually they said, even if you are a Ugandan citizen, if you are not African, you have to leave. So everybody had to leave. Now, the British were okay. The question was those who were Ugandans. Now, fortunately, there were a lot of countries that offered to take refugees. Canada was one of them, and this was through Aga Khan. I think he talked to Prime Minister Trudeau, and this agreed to take about 7,000 or 8,000 people. I think United States agreed to take about 4,000, and the European countries also were taking a few. There were altogether about 70,000 people who had to leave. So there was all of a sudden all these big lineups in the embassies, everybody trying to get out of the country. There was a lot of fear, uncertainty. The question was not really all the property you own, but it was becoming quite dangerous because the military now became quite violent too, and they wanted to just take over the properties and everything. And they would come to your house and they would just say, okay, you'll just leave, you know, we'll take over. So there was a lot of fear, and people were starting to panic because families were also split. Some were British, some were Ugandans. And so the situation became such that everybody said, whoever gets chance, let's leave, you know. It doesn't matter where you get to go. The priority was, of course, to save life because it was becoming quite scary even to walk at nights. A lot of people were, especially Africans were also killed, but a lot of people's houses were broken into, and so it was very scary. The second priority was to keep the family together. And then, of course, the immigration where we would go. So those who got the British, they were okay. The Ugandans, for example, myself, I was a student in Makerere University, and I went to the Canadian embassy, and they said, okay, we'll give you the visa, but you have to leave in 48 hours. Now, my family was kind of quite tense because they wanted me to go to Pakistan. One of my brothers got a visa to go to England. One brother said, I'm not going to Pakistan. He went through United Nations. He wanted to go to Italy. So everybody was kind of split. We didn't know for sure what to do. And I got the visa. I had to leave in 48 hours. My family wanted me to think about it, and we really the only reason why I wanted to go to Canada was because one of my professors said that if you want to continue with your medical course, then you should go to Western country instead of going to Pakistan, which made sense. And US was an option, but he said it's too expensive. You're better off going to Canada. So here I got my immigration, and but my family wasn't happy. So this is the only time in my life I have said, okay, we'll do an istikhara, let Allah decide, you know. And the istikhara, I said, do it for Pakistan. If it is bad, that's it. And it came bad, so I went to Canada. But at that time, in 90 days, most people, can you imagine how many, there's only so many planes that could come and take people. Now, the problem didn't end there. Even when you got a visa and you had to go to Entebbe, which was the main airport, a lot of people who were driving to the airport, they were stopped by the military, and obviously you had left your house, you had left all your property. The only thing you had was your probably precious metals or your clothes. And that also, there were so many checkpoints on the way to the airport, and almost everybody lost everything because they took away all the gold, They really tortured some of the people, and at that point it was just to go to the airport, get in the plane, and get out. That was the aim. And so some people thought things might get better, and they decided to stay. I guess some people were tempted by all the properties that they were going to get, because people were just handing over. They said, you can have my house, you can have my cars, you can have whatever you want. Money was valueless because you couldn't take it. Nobody would even cash it overseas. So some people who stayed there eventually, not more than a couple of weeks after the deadline, they all had to leave by United Nations because the Africans just came in that said, we will take over everything, all the businesses, all the homes. So it wasn't as drastic as Brother Raza has said, but it was a chaos, and the time period was the big thing. And fortunately, all the countries that came in to help out, and especially the last was the United Nations. Unfortunately, some people decided to go to India and Pakistan, and finally they also had to move. Now, one of the things with my family was we didn't know who is going to end up where. So good thing we had a business, small business in Pakistan, so we put that as a reference point. Wherever everybody ends up, we all write a letter to that address, and we let everybody know. So that's how we all, my brother ended up in Milwaukee, I was in Canada, one of my brothers was in England, and then the rest of the family in Pakistan. Now in Canada, we were fortunate. The Canadian government was pretty nice as far as supporting us, giving us a place to stay, supporting us for the first few months, giving houses, helping us to get jobs. Of course, I didn't look for a job. We tried to get the universities, and I was in Toronto, but I applied to all the universities, and University of Manitoba accepted us. And not only that, they were really nice enough to give us a special scholarship, because when I left, I had no money in my pocket. I was completely without any money. So it worked out good. I finished my training there. I paid back whatever the loan that I had to pay, and got my education done. Now, when you look back, we always say, Allah is the planner. There are some good things that came out of all this, I mean, people were really really scared and panicking, but after a few years, when you see there was diversification of so many families all over the world, and of course our community, especially wherever they went, they established centers, mosques, and everything. So there was nothing when we came here in 1972. There was, I think Toronto even didn't have a mosque. So I think the good thing is people have really established the religion and all the centers. And I think our second generation has also been successful in getting the education, which I think has been a good change. So we are progressing in education, and I think everybody finally got settled. Everybody did fine, alhamdulillah. But those 90 days were kind of scary. It's fortunately we didn't have any deaths that I can remember, but things worked out good. And then, of course, from Canada, I moved to North Dakota, Minnesota, and finally I'm settled here in Florida now. And that's it.
Bar Muhammadin wa al Muhammad salawat. ડોક્ટર સાહેબ માઇક તમારી પાસે જ રાખો.
Okay.
એક સવાલ છે કે આ તમારા આખા narration, there was no mention of Jamaat. Uganda had a Jamaat there, but the Jamaat didn't play a part in deciding कि आपने as a group we can go somewhere.
Every town had a Jamaat. You know, Kampala had a big Jamaat, Fort Portal, Soroti, Kabira Maido. At that time, everybody was trying to move out of the small towns and getting close to the airport. So everybody was moving to Kampala. Now, the Jamaat might have helped some people, like some people stayed in the mosque for safety reasons. But one advantage that we had in Uganda was that all these countries who had volunteered to take us as refugees were, all the embassies were open, and they were open 24/7, so everybody could at least go and apply, and then as soon as they got the visa, they could leave the country.
Excellent. Thank you so much. For those of you who are interested, there was a beautiful movie called The Last King of Scotland. In that movie, they portray Idi Amin very, very well, and it is they show all the Indians too how they went through the whole saga. Any questions from the floor? Yes, sir.
At least from my recollection, I had heard about certain stories on how Idi Amin had privately assassinated, killed a lot of his own fellow Ugandans. Did our community suffer that setback of people dying or people being killed? Any major casualties that actually took place, especially at the time during the evacuation?
One of the biggest problems in Uganda was the racial problem between Africans. When Obote was the prime minister, he of course favored his tribe. When Idi Amin came, he tried to get rid of all the enemies, you know, and he killed a lot of Africans who he thought were his enemies, who were against him. So there were a lot of Africans who were killed. The only person that I heard who was killed from our community, he used to work for the government, and he was for the police department, and I didn't get all the details as far as what, but he disappeared and they never found. So the assumption was that probably he was killed.
Excellent. Thank you. Any more questions from the floor? Yes, ma'am.
How old were you when you moved to Canada? How difficult was it for you to keep in touch with your family in those days where everyone had gone to different places? And also, when you got to Canada, was there a certain group that was taking care of the refugees, and what did they do for you?
When we left, I was 22 years old. Now, when we went to Canada, right away, first of all, the government did all the immigration, the green cards and all that. But we were assigned to certain churches. So some churches were responsible for certain families. And they are the ones who really helped us. And I remember when I had to go for an interview because I didn't have any money, the church raised money for me to go for the interview from Toronto to Winnipeg. And they also helped us to find an accommodation, and they gave us a lot of supplies, clothes. Of course, moving from Uganda in December to Canada, it was winter, so we didn't have any winter clothes, but they provided us with all the winter clothes, boots. They provided us with groceries, and they would take us, sometimes they would even take us to the church just to see. I don't think they ever tried to convert us, but they were just nice. You know, they said, we do this all the time. Anybody who is in need, we help. And I think that was a wonderful thing. Also, when we got there, one thing that the immigration always told us, because I told them I want to study and I don't have money. And they always said, Aga Khan is the one who has told us to sponsor all these people, and he can support you, don't worry about that. I mean, I wasn't an Ismaili, but Aga Khan played a big role too for the Canadians. And you see a lot of Ismailis went to Canada. So the help was there. Now communication, of course, we didn't have cell phones, and we couldn't keep a phone, but it was always writing a letter. And my parents don't read English, so I had to write in Gujarati. So we kept communication. It was with letters. And then as soon as I got chance, or after a year or so, we all had a family reunion, which was quite something.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Doctor. That was very informative. One question. Why did Ugandans not think of moving to Tanzania or Kenya, which was so close by?
Well, I think the situation was that there were so many countries who were offering, and once you have a bad experience in African country, I don't know if I can say Uganda is better than Tanzania or Kenya, people suspected that the same thing could happen there too. So if you get chance, and a lot of people, believe me, in Uganda, there were, before even Idi Amin, there were always people who said, oh, I wish I could go to England. London was a big hit at that time. So here a lot of people looked at it as, oh, this is an opportunity we are getting. We are getting the visa, we are getting everything, And they did get good help, those who went to wherever they went. Whether they went to Sweden, whether they went to England or through United Nations.
Right.
Everybody was provided with accommodation, food, health, care, everything until they were settled.
Right.
So it was a good opportunity to really get out.
Very good. I think Idi Amin did us a favor by making it national news, whereby in Somalia, it wasn't national news, it was just amongst us. So, very good. Thank you. Any more questions from the public? G.
I think the reason why they did not come to Tanzania was because there was the relationship between our president Nyerere with the prime minister. The prime minister who was overthrown was very good, and then when he was overthrown, that's when our enmity started, and that led to the war.
Afterwards,
because I remember I was in the national service, and we were told that we should get ready, and we were told to dress ourselves and go to war the next day. It was just a ruse. But we remember that we are going to go and overthrow Idi Amin. Of course, and finally, it happened.
Well, it happened after we had left. And one other thing, every town that we had a community, we had a mosque. And so everything was left there. A few people who went back, and they say that the mosques are still being used quite well. There are a lot of Muslims who are using it, and the homes, of course, are taken over by whoever.
Very good. Any more questions before I hand it over to the next speaker? Yes, sir.
There's a very, very important lesson for us to learn here. For the kind of help that everybody stepped up to do that, we should really learn from this that we should also help. It doesn't matter who the community is or what community is, but we should basically do the same thing for human beings. There's a big lesson to learn here. That's what I want.
Oh, I definitely agree. And just to make another comment, I don't think any of the Muslim countries came forward to sponsor. Unfortunately, but I agree, these people really helped us a lot.
Dr. Bhalwany, thank you so much. We do appreciate your sharing the experiences and knowledge with us. Without further ado, Malim Jivraj on his experiences in Zanzibar. Malim, what language are you speaking?
You tell me.